Okay. So, all right, we're gonna get started here. I want to respect everyone's time so that we can end at the appropriate time. It's a busy time for everyone, I imagine. So, I want to say hello to everyone. My name is Dexter Wimberly. I'm a senior critic at New York Academy of Art. Today, we're going to have a fantastic discussion about galleries with three fantastic gallerists. I'm going to get right to it. I'm going to share abbreviated versions of their bios. Of course, everyone can go on to New York Academy of Art's website to read a more extensive bio. And if you want even more information than that, then certainly you can go to their respective websites where you can get all of the dirt. Allison Ayers is a partner and director at Houston-based Sicardi, Ayers, Bacino. Before joining the gallery in 1997 as a marketing advisor, Allison worked in advertising and marketing with Ogilvy and Maira and Hermann Hospital. In 2000, she became partners with Maira Ines Sicardi and Carlos Bacino and a director of the gallery. Since then, she, along with Maira Ines Sicardi, has spearheaded the gallery's programming, partnering with area universities, independent curators, and international galleries to bring the most important modern and contemporary Latin American artists to the public. Those efforts have included lectures, book signings, panel discussions, and other activities. In 2012, along with her partners, Allison coordinated the gallery's transition to a custom-designed 6,000 square foot building with 2 gallery spaces and a dedicated research center. I can't wait to visit. David Castillo holds degrees in history and art history from Yale University and I believe this is Angelicum in Rome.
The Angelicum.
Thank you. In 2000, he has dealt in important Latin American, European, and American secondary market works. Castillo has held positions at museums, including the Yale University Art Gallery's American Decorative Arts Curatorial Department. He continues to assist private clients in building their collections, in addition to managing David Castillo Gallery, and has lectured widely on various topics in art. David Castillo Gallery opened 2005, and in an ongoing manner from year to year, the gallery has been named hundreds of times in prominent publications. The gallery's artists have helped shape the most current vision of contemporary art. David's gallery has produced more than 130 fine art exhibitions to date. I can't wait to have this conversation with you, David. Jessica SIlverman is the founder and CEO of a contemporary art gallery with an international reputation for curating compelling exhibitions, building artist careers, and collaborating with collectors who are keen on positive provenance. Her mission is to support artists whose relevance to contemporary culture is such that museums want to understand and embrace their work. For 9 years, SIlverman sat on the San Francisco Arts Commission, where she oversaw the acquisition of public art and has since then advised property developers. SIlverman recently opened a new gallery space at 621 Grant Avenue in San Francisco's Chinatown. Welcome. So I thank you for bearing with me as I go through all of those bios. It's always the fun part, right? And I know there's so much more to share, so much work that you guys have done over the years. And I think a good transition from where we are now is to give you each an opportunity to share some information about your gallery's program and about the work that you do. I think you each have prepared brief presentations that you can share with our audience. We do not have to go in alphabetical order. If we have a volunteer, that's great, but just like in school, I'll call on you.
So I'm happy to kick us off, Dexter. It's great to be here. If that's okay with my colleagues here. Cool. It's great to be here with David and Allison and you, Dexter, and the New York Academy. So I'm just going to share my screen here and let's make sure, can you guys see this okay? Okay, super. So I just have a few images here. My name is Jessica SIlverman. This is a picture of the new gallery space on the ground floor, as Dexter said, 621 Grant Avenue. The gallery's been in business since, 13 years now. This is my third space. We actually rented the space in February of 2020 and started renovating in March, and then the pandemic hit. And so we only moved in April of this year. And so far it's going very well. And I just have a few images of the interior that I'll show you. It's double the size of our last space. So it's 5,000 square feet. Here you're looking at Claire Rojas's exhibition, which was the opening exhibition of the gallery. This new space, we actually added Claire along with 3 other artists during the pandemic, Sadie Barnett, who's our next show, Catherine Wagner, and also Andrea Bowers, who will have a show next year. And this is an image of the second gallery in the space, which is kind of hidden off of some stairs. And we sometimes have a little inventory installs there, or starting next year, kind of proper solo shows in that space. Most recently, we had a show with Judy Chicago, and here is our ambitious install. This new space is really allowing us to expand what we do with our on-site exhibitions and be more ambitious. So in the middle of the space is a body of work called Sunset Squares, which is a new outdoor version of a 1965 sculpture that Judy made back in LA that was originally interior, and then we fabricated it for an outdoor collector. And lastly, our current show is with Woody D'Othello. Woody is a Bay Area artist originally from Miami. I don't know, David, if you knew that. And here we're looking at his installation, which, as you can see, is really very colorful and optimistic, and it's called Looking In. And there's a lot of kind of mirrors that are reflecting and kind of gazing upwards. And it's a show really about optimism and also the world around us. And at the center of the space is a piece called Fountain, a la Duchamp, but it is a fountain that's kind of twisted and not actually releasing water, which is kind of symbolic for Woody, because he comes from Miami, which has a lot of water, and now lives in the Bay Area, which does not have as much. And so, yeah, that's just a quick overview of, what we've been doing this past year, which I thought would be a good way to kind of introduce the gallery. So I'll hand it off.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Allison, I'm going to call on you.
All right, let me share my screen. Here is my PowerPoint. Sure. Okay. What is it sharing completely or no?
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay.
I mean, we see the the preview of the slides on the left, but it's fine. You can go full screen, or you can just proceed. Either way is totally
better now.
Oh, that's perfect. That's
okay,
perfect.
Great. So this is our gallery space that we built in 2012. I started working with the gallery in '97. Just to give you a history, our gallery is 27 years old. And my partner from Argentina, Maira Ines Sicardi, just had this idea that there really wasn't a space in Houston when she moved here in the late 80s, and thought it would be a great bridge to have a space here from Latin America to the US. So that is our programming, working with Latin America, bringing the artists to the United States. So together we formed a partnership in 2000 with Carlos Bacino. And when we moved to this space, a little earlier, we shifted the programming to also incorporate master artists. So when we started in the 90s, we were working primarily with contemporary artists. And I think that's important to note, because I think a lot of people see us as an artist, as a gallery that works in only modernism. But we started with contemporary artists, working with Ruth Benzacar in Argentina. She was one of the first galleries we collaborated with, and with scholars from the beginning. So we worked with Liliana Porter and actually met her at the Blanton. We were at a lecture there, heard her speak, and started working with her. So this is Porter, Pablo Siqueira, who also we still work with today, from Buenos Aires. Then we moved in, it shifted into working with the masters. This is School of the South. This is Torres Garcia. And this is Mercedes Pardo, one of the estates that we're working with right now out of Venezuela. This was an installation that went down last week. One of our masters, Carlos Cruz Diaz. This is our upstairs gallery. That's a project room. That's really an amazing space for us to work with video, with smaller installations. It's just a really nice place to view things. Here right now, we are actually installing, and in the other room, we have just a complete mess. Gilbert Vicario is here, and he is curating the upstairs and downstairs spaces. So this is a way that we also work with artists outside the gallery, and it's a great way to work with younger artists. And so in the upstairs exhibition, we are going to have the work of the master, Olga de Amaral, but then we also have Marina Weffert, who's from Brazil. And so she's a contemporary artist who will be in this exhibition, and Sandra Monteroso from Guatemala. This work is just beautiful. Downstairs, we have Liz Cohen showing. She's an American, also Colombian. We're installing her work, and this is a large scale installation titled Him that will, she will be in conversation on Saturday with the curator. So that kind of gives you an idea of what our programming is. We go between contemporary and Latin. We've, in the past 20 years, seen a steady growth in this market. So it's been really interesting to see what's happened with departments collecting, looking back, looking forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was great. And so I think you'll do a stop screen share, and then David, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here. I will do my screen share. Hopefully that will, can everybody see it's starting? Okay, good. So I'm glad everybody did it a little differently, so everybody gets something different. So I just kindly asked the gallery to prepare just a little moving image thing while I briefly say a few things about the gallery of different shows that are recent as well as from the beginning, to kind of give some through line of what the gallery has shown from the beginning and how that narrative has been unchanged from 2005 to the beginning. So as the screen moves along through all these shows, I thought I would just say a little bit of some of the things the artists are working on right now in a brief way before my slide ends in 5 minutes or 4.5 minutes. So Sanford Biggers, who coincidentally is on the screen right now from one of his last 4 solo shows at the gallery, currently has exhibitions at the MFA Boston, the Phillips Collection, MAD in New York, among other museums. Von Span, who's just scrolling through the screen now, recently had his first museum solo show at the Kemper Museum, and currently has his second museum solo show up at the Samick Museum in Pennsylvania, and will have a major project with us in collaboration with Almin Rec at Art Basel in December, and is also currently in the Rouvel Museum and the De La Cruz Museum. Caleb Lindsay, who I think should be coming up very shortly, is currently in exhibitions at the Berkeley Art Museum and the Ringling. Shanique is up at the Brooklyn Museum. Shanique Smith, Yessi Yuzao, who is a new artist that the gallery has started working with, is currently in an exhibition at the De La Cruz Museum. Lau Ashton Harris, the ICA Miami, upcoming shows at the Rose Art Museum, among others. Pepe Mar, whom I think already scrolled past us or is coming up very shortly, at the Frost Art Museum, and we'll have a 15-year, here we go, a 15-year career survey at the Tampa Museum. Belkis Ayon, who's an artist estate actually that we work with, currently has work up at the Sao Paulo Biennial, and will have a major retrospective at the Reina Sofia now in November. It will open to the public, and we'll also have a major presentation by her in December of her work. Cyvera Simmons also has a big project coming up at Art Basel. She's currently on view at the Rouvel Museum, the De La Cruz Museum, the Sarasota Museum. So that's kind of in a nutshell. What we have up at the gallery right now are 3 exhibitions, one by Glexis Novoa, who's also a longtime artist of the gallery, Kate Gilmore, whom I've also worked with for many, many years, and Emilio Martinez, who's not an artist that is represented, but whose work we're exhibiting in one of the smaller of the 3 spaces in the gallery. And pretty much upcoming, we have 2 major public art commissions by artists of the gallery. One is a big international commission, and that's pretty much what we have recent, past, and a couple things that are coming up. I think it'll scroll through a couple more images, or I can just stop sharing because you maybe got the picture.
Well, thanks so much for that. So, I have a lot of questions, and it's always interesting to know where to begin. I think I want to divide the conversation into 2 parts, sort of how galleries work, and then also how galleries work with artists. And I think that I want to do that because I think that there's something valuable in those 2 different lines of thought. Most of the people who are with us today or who will watch this video subsequently are artists. I am certain of it. So they're curious about, more often than not, if they're watching something like this, they're curious about how artists and galleries come together. Like, how does a gallery go about discovering an artist? It's an age-old question, but I think it's one of those questions that, although you've been hearing it for years, as times change, the answer changes, right? So why don't we start with the elephant in the room, right? And that is, for each of you, how do you go about finding artists that you want to work with? Living or not, like what's your process like? And could we start with you, Jessica?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'll take Woody Diothello as an example because he has a show in the gallery. I went to CCA and I always go to their open studios and kind of try to be low key and just walk around. And I saw his studio at the time and he was kind of sitting in the back corner drawing, actually. And I was kind of intrigued because everyone else was sort of like standing at their door, like ready to greet you. And so I was sort of drawn in because he was like not engaging. He was just like, it's another studio day, I'm here to work. But I went in and started chatting with him and was just really intrigued with his process. And he told me this much later, but I posted something on Instagram of his work, and he became kind of like a hot shot amongst his friends, I guess, at CCA. But, going to open studios for grad shows has been, for me, a really important part of how I've built the Bay Area artist aspect of my roster in particular. And from there, Woody and I kind of started working together, probably 6 months later as he graduated. I at least waited till he graduated. Otherwise, I've had introductions to artists from collectors. Rose B. Simpson, a Native American artist we represent. I was celebrating New Year's in Santa Fe with Judy Chicago and went to the Wheelwright Museum, which does 1 show a year of a Native American contemporary artist. Walked in, saw this show by an artist I'd never heard of before, could not get the work out of my head, and reached out to her Santa Fe gallery and started a conversation. So I guess that's kind of a way of saying, for me, I guess it's predominantly through seeing things in person. It's not to say that I don't like scroll like everyone through Instagram and see things that I like and kind of tag them, but I'm very interested in the kind of end result of the work. And so the in-person experience is typically how I end up having a longer relationship with an artist.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Allison, how about you?
Well, I would say working with Latin America, we have a lot of travel involved. And so it kind of has become this organic thing. When we travel, we're going to see exhibitions, possibly important exhibitions. We also meet people there. And so we talk to other artists. Many of our artists have recommended other artists that we work with. We also have curator friends who recommend other artists to check them out. And so it really provides the opportunity. If I'm in New York or if I'm in Mexico City, wherever I am, I'm always open. We've been open for a long time, 27 years, but I really do value asking people, you know, what do you think? Who's hot? Who, you know, do you have anyone who you think would work well with our programming? You know, because our programming kind of shifts a little, or maybe we're interested, like for instance, this exhibition we're doing now that is dealing with textiles. For 2 years, we've been talking about a textile exhibition, and I actually was going to have one of the Strina artists in an earlier exhibition, and just with pandemic things changed, but I just kept asking, who do you know, what do you think? And I found that to be the way. But the open studios too, we have the core here, and I've been involved with the Glassell core program, and it's amazing. And also to the students, I recommend talking to the critical studies students too, because sometimes they know things that they don't, or they come up with ideas together. And it seems like the younger artists who are working a lot of times work together with the curators, and they sort of grow up together, I've noticed, when you see people. And so I guess that's what I would say.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And David, what's your process like as it relates to that question?
So to agree with both my colleagues, obviously there are a lot of different ways that I've come to find the artists that I work with. And it's oftentimes when MFA students ask this same question, I tell them that it's a very social business. So it is important to actually go and see things in person. So for artists, for example, to go to openings of other artists, to go to museum opening, gallery openings, nonprofits, because that's how they find out about shows and see how their own work fits into things. But for me personally, obviously I have a specific narrative to the gallery and to its program, but it's been very organic. I have to say that none of the artists I represent were ever recommended to me, although people do recommend often artists for me to look at. It was all either in a setting of a nonprofit where I was there for a social reason as a supporter of something, and I met an artist. So that happened to then lead to a studio visit and became something that connected, you know, it was related to the gallery's program and vision. And so you begin working with the artists. So I have to say, for me personally, it's been like that with all of the artists. It's all been an organic process. None of the artists whom I work with, even the artists you'd be surprised to know that about, did not have a gallery when I started working with them. So it's just been an organic process. It wasn't looking at a big show someone was having or anything like that. It was, who are the artists that make sense for what the gallery does aesthetically and narratively. And it's always been just a process where you happen to meet them. One good example that has happened at least 3 times has been me giving a lecture where the artist is in the audience and then asks for a studio visit based on what I said in the lecture. So, you know, that's definitely been, I would say, the highest ranking. So you got 3 out of 17 happened from a talk where the artist made some connection, and rightfully so, led to a studio visit and then led to working with the artist.
Thank you. And so if I'm understanding more or less what each of you has said here, it takes place in many different ways. There's no one way that an artist can, let's say, get representation. But I wonder if some of the folks that are joining us or will eventually watch this as well are thinking, well, it's very difficult to reach out to a gallery. And again, I know that historically most galleries do not take unsolicited, you know, portfolios and pitches. One of my he's since passed away, but one of my eldest friends was Ivan Karp, who ran the OK Harris Gallery in New York City, who worked with Leo Castelli in the 1950s and was one of the first galleries in Soho. I think he opened his gallery in early 60s or something like that. But anyway, my point of bringing Ivan Karp up is that, you know, in his generation, they would just receive portfolio after portfolio, like all day. I mean, he told me a very interesting story that he was actually the gatekeeper at Castelli's gallery. He was like the person who made sure like you didn't disturb Leo if you showed up unannounced. And I believe he said that one day a station wagon pulls up, and on top of the station wagon, all of these canvases, it's just like, clearly an artist is driving this car. Like, you just know it. And a guy gets out of the station wagon and pulls out a big canvas and is bringing it in and dragging it up the stairs. And he stops him and he says, like what, what are you doing here? And what makes you think you can just show up unannounced? And this person says whatever it is they said. And Ivan goes, well, let me just look at what you have there. Let me just look at what you have there. Because you can't drag that across these floors. You scuff up these floors, there's going to be problems here. Anyway, long story short is, that's how Ivan met Roy Lichtenstein. All right.
Well, I mean, I have heard I've heard stories like that. Like my friend Laura Bartlett, who doesn't have a gallery anymore in London, she did, and Cyprien Gaillard, I don't know if you guys know his work. He shows a Spruce Makers now, but he just like walked in totally unsolicited, and she had kind of a flexible afternoon, and so she sat down with him and started chatting with him and really liked the work and ended up representing him. That hasn't personally been my experience. Although I have seen some interesting work from unsolicited artists. I think like dealers do like to find things. We're kind of, curator like, I'd say curator adjacent in that way. And so coming to things on our own seems to be something we all kind of do. I mean, Allison mentioned like people tell her about things or she asks around. I do the same. But in the end, kind of like, instinctively, like if it's a good fit.
Right.
And I would say to artists, like, it's not that we're like evil people that we don't want unsolicited things. It's truly just like the gallery business is really hard. It's a lot of work. And, speaking for myself, like we don't have a huge team and we take on a lot. And we just can't promise to kind of like give the kind of feedback that we'd like to when people spend the time to send us things.
Right. I mean, I think that's totally reasonable. And certainly in this day and age, because of technology, it's an additional challenge, right? I mean, one of you mentioned Instagram, and of course you can almost never have a conversation about art these days that is not also a conversation about Instagram. Love it or hate it. But my question regarding Instagram is that a place that you pay attention to?
I do.
I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
who's good. I was just gonna say, I mean, yes, obviously we look at Instagram, but I have never found an artist from looking at Instagram. But I think it's just a part of how art is disseminated, and so it would seem strange for a gallerist or even other artists or curators never to look at Instagram, certainly by the presence that a lot of people have in the art world on that platform. It's quite obvious people use it to promote exhibitions and artists to show their own work. So it's definitely, a free platform that allows artists to put their work out there. And certainly I have to say, there must be curators and dealers who have discovered great talent that way. It hasn't happened to me directly, but it stands to good reason that it's a valuable resource, certainly for artists who are starting out to put their work out there. Maybe they feel, they don't have access to talk to somebody yet, and they're just starting out. People see it. So it's definitely wide exposure early on.
Yeah. If anyone else wants to add anything to that.
No, I mean, I definitely pay attention to Instagram, and I even look at other galleries promoting artists that aren't necessarily Latin American, just looking for conversations, like other galleries I respect and programs I respect. I will look and find artists that I really appreciate, and it has made me look. Actually, there have been some friends of mine. I have been looking at one artist in particular, and so no, I think that it can make a difference to have a good presence there. And it's funny with our artists, like we kind of have half and half. Some put them on, and some don't like it at all. Some are like crazy, like But I think it's important as galleries to have it. And I will say, I'm always looking. I'm trying to see what other galleries are doing too. We're always learning. So I mean, I would tell the younger artists that to definitely photograph your art well, because if you can put it there and place it there, you do have the opportunity to have it seen. I mean, especially today.
I know, absolutely.
Different than a website. I think people get tagged and people, I think it's a bit different even since pandemic than before. I've looked more than ever.
Yeah, and are any of you fatigued by the screens? I mean, I'm, this conversation is about you guys, not about me, but I just like, I need to share something because this is the closest I'm going to get to therapy in a long time. So I'm in San Francisco and for an opening for a show that I've curated, but I haven't been around this many people in a long time. And it is like wearing on me.
Yeah.
it's just like, it's overwhelming. It's just overwhelming. Maybe I've been to 10 events in the past 6 days. It's just
You've forgotten how to do it.
I don't even know how to do it anymore. I don't.
Well, I think the problem is that it's like colliding with the kind of digital schedule. I mean,
Right.
like we're all here
Right, exactly.
online, and you probably have another event tonight, Dexter.
Yeah, I'm doing a talk. As soon as we're done here, I'm running to the museum to do a talk with Billy Zingala.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Exactly. In person.
I mean, I personally, other than for forums like this, steer clear of Zoom calls. People who schedule Zoom calls, my assistant and I are like, no, we're doing a phone call, and I'm like walking the streets of San Francisco. Like I cannot be stuck behind my computer anymore.
So that brings me to a question about studio visits and Zoom. Okay,
Yeah.
so I know that during the height of the pandemic, and Lord knows, I hope that those words, I don't regret those words. I hope the height has happened. During the height of the pandemic, I know that there were a lot of digital virtual studio visits, right? Has that been something that you've found any sort of like success with? And not in terms of finding artists to work with or represent, just in terms of, does that work?
I mean, for me, it does. I actually have one tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. because the artist lives in Greece. And, so I think they work as well as anything, right? I mean, there's nothing that you could, like, there's nothing that has the same feeling of standing in front of something. But I'm trying personally not to like do what I did, 2 years ago and like hop on the plane to everything that's happening around me. And so the Zoom visits are a really great stand-in, even temporarily. And at least you get to see someone's face, and have like a semi more intimate connection.
And if you have something really wow too, I got on a Zoom for William Kentridge, one of my children's in college, and that was fabulous. If you can tap into that, that's amazing. If you can really provide like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about it. I think I was recording it. It was so good. So
no, thank you. So I have an interesting, I hope interesting question for each of you, right? So I'm sure you've been on hundreds of studio visits, maybe thousands, but certainly a lot. Who's counting? What makes a good studio visit, in your opinion? And I know that, like, so what do I mean by the question? In other words, not so much how long the visit is, but I'm an emerging artist. I have finally convinced you to come to my studio. I'm super excited. How should I prepare for your visit? Should the work already be out? Should I, like, if you could just give some pointers in your opinion, what makes a good studio visit?
David, you want to take it? Or you're just on mute?
Oh, I'm unmuted now. Sure. I think there's a lot of different scenarios because it's not the same for, for every artist. But in an ideal situation, you do have some work that can be seen in person, which is always just helpful. Even with photography, there's something you can't appreciate about the scale if everything you're looking at is on the screen. So if it's, a studio visit that you've prepared, you've invited someone to your studio, I think it is great to have at least some of your most recent work out to be able to have a conversation, even work in progress, because that always leads to kind of a fun interchange between, you know, the viewer, the gallerist, the curator, and what the artist is thinking. And sometimes different ideas emerge just from having that in progress conversation. And certainly, of course, having, you know, slides on your computer don't hurt either, to at least have a point of reference, maybe for works that no longer exist, or that you made very early on, or that is completely different from what you're making now, because that also gives the gallerist or curator or fellow artist a perspective on where the work emerged from. So I think there's definitely a lot of different ways that it works, but in an ideal situation, obviously there's work in person and then kind of like some window into the past, you know, for somebody that's completely unfamiliar with your work.
On the practical side, I would also say offer seating of some kind. It doesn't have to be world's most comfortable seat. And like some fluids, water, or like a soda or something like that. I can't tell you how many times I've like schlepped across town for a studio visit and have been going all day, and there's like literally nowhere to sit. There's paint everywhere. You can't even put your bag down. And maybe there's no bathroom in the building, and they definitely don't have water. So just from a practical perspective, you can make a really good impression if you are prepared on all those levels, as David suggested.
I also think that you should relax a little bit, you know, like you're talking about providing fluids, something to eat, or say, let's go have some coffee afterwards, just so you can really get to know and loosen up and talk more about your work. Because I feel like I've learned more when I've spent a little more time with someone versus just they're nervous. I mean, I know that you're nervous. I mean, even our artists are nervous about new series when they're showing you things. They're picking up on, do you like this? Do you not like that? And so I think trying to make the situation, like Jessica said, comfortable, but also making it personal, making it a little more personal. So you're not, I don't know. So you see if you connect, because a lot of it's about connection too, you know, if you can work together. And so it's beyond just the work.
Well,
I would just add to Allison's point very quickly that I agree 100%. It's as much about the personal connection as it is about the work. If there isn't that rapport, then it's really not going to work anyway. It doesn't matter if the work is a fit if there's not some kind of connection right at the beginning, you know, and it's not really up to the artist to produce that. It's just a matter of see what happens when you're there in person. So
it's a chemistry thing.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. It's funny, Jessica, you mentioned the water. I've talked to many students around this topic of like, I had a slide in a presentation that I gave. So it's studio visits, do's and don'ts. You know, and again, completely subjective, you know, just my opinion. But, you know, one of the do's was certainly, you have a guest visiting. So treat them like it's a guest visiting, right?
Totally agree.
It's not like your aunt's coming over to spend the weekend, but still, you want to make sure that you have a welcoming environment. And, you know, and I also encourage students and artists who aren't students as well. I also encourage them to, you know, be honest and frank about, you know, your studio situation, because we've seen it all. I mean, I know that I've seen it all. You know, I've done studio visits with people where their studio is their /kitchen, you know, and I've done studio visits where the artist has the equivalent of like an airplane hangar. And I'm like, wow, how'd you get this? You know, so it's, you know, it runs the gamut. And I think that some artists might be hesitant to even have a studio visit because they think that and again, I'm not talking about a dangerous situation. You don't want to go into any scenario, but I think that some artists feel as though their studio is also a reflection of their work. It's a weird kind of psychology, because I've gone into great studios that had terrible work in them. It's like,
yes,
it's like maybe spend less time on your decor.
Yeah. I mean, I also, I mean, I think it's interesting. I don't know, you know, for David and Allison, like I'm in San Francisco, we're all kind of in cities outside of New York and LA. And For me, like San Francisco is very expensive. And so studios tend to end up being really far a lot of the time. And so that extra care is hugely appreciated.
No, absolutely. I mean, are there any don'ts? And again, it doesn't have to be an exhaustive list, and we'll move on from this subject shortly. But are there any things that you would just say recommend to not do? Like one of the things I
Don't
say is
talk too much.
Okay, great.
Not you, but the artist.
I know you're not talking to me.
But you know,
Don't
like
sell out of your studio. Don't sell out of your
Okay, okay, great. So let's go down the line here. Let's start with Allison.
yeah.
Okay.
So go
Yeah.
ahead, Allison.
Yeah, don't sell out of your studio. If you want to build your career,
Mhm.
work with galleries, work with curators. Selling out of your studio is the first way to mess up your market. So-
What about for a younger artist who doesn't have representation and they just feel like that's a way for them to, frankly, make money?
Well, I think if you're having like an open house situation, you know, I mean, I know that the Corps had that before and they have it, and you know that you can buy to support. That's one thing. But I think once you start getting it going, you need to be really careful with that. And what advice do you guys have? I just think it's a tricky, if you get used to it.
Mhm.
I mean, that's definitely important advice. And to that point, I would also say MFA students. I think a lot of them get taken advantage of in the sense that, you know, it seems wonderful that someone comes in and loves your work and they're offering you $500 for a painting that's later going to sell for $3 million. Or, you know, that's an exaggerated example, but not far off from some examples. So I think, you know, I understand that artists may want to sell, you know, they have bills like everybody else. But certainly I would discourage it from the school level. And then once you start building on like your professional, visibility as an artist, it should be under some kind of, you know, system, whether it's a nonprofit or with curators or group shows or shows with your friends where, you know, you put an exhibition together. There's just a lot of really different ways that artists can show their work and sell in a formal way, rather than, you know, people are showing up and just giving you random numbers for what they're willing to pay. And it is hard because it's not something usually taught in MFA programs, and a lot of MFA programs actually steer clear of this part of the professionalization of artists, which I think is unfortunate, because that's how a lot of missteps happen early on. You know, the artist isn't sure about a consignment, what the split should be, percentages, discounts. I feel like every MFA program that's reputable in the world should have at least one seminar on this topic, because I don't know an artist personally who has not made all of the mistakes early on. And it's almost like a rite of passage, but it's not a necessary rite of passage, right? If there was some kind of sharing or teaching of that information, I don't think artists would make those mistakes. They'd be like, oh, I hadn't thought about that, you know, because they're creative, so they're busy making their work. They're not thinking, you know, how does this translate to the business side? But the two go hand in hand, as everybody knows, you know. So it is important, I think, to learn about all of it at once.
I think that's absolutely true and great. And, you know, it's, for me, having been a curator for about 15 years, I met a lot of artists very early on in their career, but also was very early on in my career. You know, a lot of it was just figuring it out, you know, but a place that I've arrived at recently in the past, I would say past few years, you know, I've never considered myself to be a collector, like capital C collector. Yes, I have some art, but I don't see myself in that way. But I also realize that although there are relationships I have with artists that would allow me to support them in a number of different ways, there's a lot of value for their future and the ecosystem that they're existing in if I buy the work from the gallery that represents them. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, because they're thinking, well, I mean, the first thing they're thinking is you're going to get a better price if you buy directly from the artist. That's obviously the motivation more often than not. No matter what else they say, that's generally the motivation. But what I've realized is that, for example, I won't name names, but there's an artist whose work I saw at a residency a couple of years ago in North Carolina. I was just blown away by it.
Mhm.
And I realized that if I really want to support her career, I should wait until she has a show, which I knew was imminent, and buy the work from the gallery from the show. Because that'll accomplish a number of things. I'd end up with the work, great. Her gallery has a sale, great. They have more conviction that she was a good artist to represent. It kind of just helps everyone all around. And then also I have like provenance. This work was in that show. It was very, very clear. But anyway, I maybe that might be a bit too inside baseball, but we did have a question that came in, and the question was, what about selling prints through your artist website? Like, if is that something that makes sense? Again, and I know that this is probably rooted in wanting to generate some income.
I mean, I think selling work out of your studio or selling prints off of your website, it's just a decision that one has to make. And I don't really think it's horrible if an artist doesn't have representation that's clear, that they sell out of their studio. I mean, I personally buy work sometimes out of artist studios, especially if it's an artist who I'm interested in and I'm thinking about. Sometimes I buy a piece and I live with it just to kind of like wrap my head around the practice a little bit more. I think, it's not a good thing to sell work out of your studio when you have a dealer and you're like going around them. That's not okay. And, with prints on your website, I think if it's a lower price point, part of your practice, and it's a way to get a little interest and make some sales, I don't see any problem with it. But I wouldn't if the goal at the end of the day is to have a long career that is kind of generated through the studio practice, which is primarily sculpture or painting, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. David, did you want to add something?
I just wonder if the artist asking the question is referring to prints because their works are print-based, or they're making prints out of something else, meaning they make sculpture or they're painters and they're making prints. That's, something that maybe I wouldn't really think is such a great idea, to kind of diminish what the work is to get like a less expensive price point from the website. Obviously, if the work is print-based, then that's the nature of the work. But if you're making a print of a painting or you're making a print of a sculpture, I think that's just kind of watering down the whole practice and the whole exercise for the artist, not really for anybody else. You should put at the forefront, what is your work? I don't think it's necessary to make a print to sell it on a website, unless, again, the print is the actual work, which could be, and I don't know for this particular artist.
Their question was actually about high quality prints of original paintings. So they clarified, right?
So yes, I personally would discourage that. I think the focus should be, what is your actual work, and not making something that maybe comes across more like poster-like and more affordable. I think it's important for artists to preserve the integrity of whatever their vision is, whether as painters or as sculptors. Obviously, a lot of artists make prints at some point in their career or in collaboration with an amazing printer. But if it's just to be able to, sell a $50 version of what could be a $2,000 painting, that I don't really see much point in personally. I mean, that's my opinion.
Well, we're coming down to the final 10 minutes. I want to encourage everyone who's joined us, if you have any questions, now's the time to make sure that you ask your questions. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for people to think of their questions, why don't we just go down the line and have each of you share, what do you have coming up? Like what's in the works that you're excited about? Tell me one thing that you're working on that you just kind of wake up charged and thinking about.
Oh, God.
I can think
No,
of
Allison, go.
actually something that we've been working on, I think for 2 years. We are finally publishing a book of texts that we have compiled, and I have it written somewhere on one of my slides, through the 27 years. So we've worked with curators and artists, and it's been a labor of love, but it's about to be about to go to the publisher. And so it's going to be amazing with like 50 texts. It's something that we're really proud of, and I think it'll show our history. So
Awesome.
that's nice.
Jessica?
That's really cool, Allison. We're not really into the publishing side of things yet, but I admire
It's
galleries.
a lot.
It's a lot. I know.
We're a small group too, so that's why it's taking so long.
I aspire. So well done. I'm actually tremendously excited for our next show with Sadie Barnett. Sadie is an Oakland-based artist whose work I've been following for a long time. And she actually worked for Andrea Bowers, who's also an artist we represent. And so we've had her show on the books for a while, and with the pandemic, it kind of kept getting pushed. And I think it's going to be her largest exhibition to date, and it's super ambitious. She has been really focused over the past few years on this body of work that looks back at a 500-page FBI document that is about her father, who was a Black Panther. And she has a show up now at the Benton Museum and the Pitzer Museum as well. And just really excited for her. I'm actually going to a talk of hers tonight at Mills. So can't wait for the show November 20th.
Picking one thing, obviously, it must have been hard for everybody, although Allison, that sounds like that was the easy pick because that's pretty monumental, and it's 30 years. There's one project that I am super excited about that is an international commission by one of the artists that I have been working a lot on, and is finally inching toward being announced. So that's super exciting. So I would say that's the one project I'm very excited about, and also a collaboration that Siveria Simmons will be doing in December. So I think both of those are things that I've been working on for a while and super excited about.
Well, thank you.
Is everyone here going to Miami?
Yes.
I know David's in
I
Miami.
live here, so
Yeah.
I will be here. Actually, people tell me it's going to be super busy. I think it's going to be kind of crazy. People are really ready to go back and go hard. All the clients I've asked, artists, everybody's like, I'm coming. I bought my tickets. So we'll see. Masked up, but people will be here.
Totally.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, I want to thank the three of you for today's conversation. I think there was a lot of great insight shared. We didn't have any additional questions come in, but I think I asked enough questions for the day. So anyway, I hope to see you all in person sometime in the next few months, one place or another. And again, thank you for your generosity and your kindness. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dexter, and thanks to the Academy.
Thank you so much.
Great to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.